The Otherworld. Piece 3. The Otherworld blinks. Just for a second, the entire island feels a sudden jolt. It pulses out, a ripple of unease sweeping every branch and stone, before abruptly fading away. Alarm rose at once, panic etched in its wake. Voices spring up, calls and shouts and cries of worry. Something is very, very wrong. We feel it too. Sparks ignite the air we breathe, filling our throats with a film of dread. But now where? Everyone knows the source. Every heart leapt, tugged towards the great black lake. To the swans, then? Or... Footsteps are hurrying, running in the opposite direction, towards a new blaze of moonlight, illuminating a glade to the south of the island. Every other inhabitant seems to be heading there. From the mightiest pixie to the sweetest of giants. Everyone. Shall we follow? I think, perhaps, just for tonight, we might instead be on our most mischievous behaviour. Let us go the other way. To the great black lake. The mists are hanging lower and heavier now, the further we press in to the tallest of the trees on the island. It is dead silent. Not a pinprick of movement, not a flutter of voices. Even in the days of sunlit hours, the island is still usually rich with noise. Snores mostly, but the wakened trees do not sleep, and one can usually catch snippets of their low, rumbling conversations throughout the day. Often, the pine forest is sprinkled through with pattering footsteps, when the most eager workers persist with their projects, even after sleep has started to niggle at their eyes. But this night, when all ought to be at their noisiest, not a peep. It is this which is the most perplexing, and the most worrisome. Pressing on, the very air feels full, a weight in the landscape barring our path. Do they not wish us to see? The ground, however, spurs us on. Pebbles, moss, and earth will at our heels, pressing back against the chill which halts our step. Shoving and heaving, we eventually fall into place in the tree line surrounding the deep black waters. There are no dancing ghosts this time. As we peer closer, we believe the swans must have dove to safety. But 7. 7 pale feathered heads sit sunk low in the water of the still black lake. Dark eyes are all narrowed. Following their gaze, we will watch too. The mirrors are all aglow. White dust-like embers rise and fall, as though the entire circlet of archways were being beaten by a drum in slow time. We press our noses closer into the thick, musty air, unable to move closer. And then, the glowing bursts in one breath of bright, white light. And as it blasts out and resonates, it centers itself on one mirror. They are all the same in appearance, so we could not tell if this one were particularly special. But this one mirror continues to glow until suddenly it fizzles and sparks, and the glow is gone. Silence once more. The swans are still there, perhaps an inch, maybe 2 higher out of the water. We swear perhaps we can see the feathered shoulders of some, and then a shape emerges. It's hazy at first, still wrapped up in the grey shadows that loom just behind the glass of each of the mirrors. But as it steps out, it looks unmistakably like a small human girl. Her age is of little consequence here, but she certainly has not yet reached her 14th year. Describing her appearance at this point of her tale would be fruitless. After all, none shall recognise her very soon. All that is noteworthy, however, is that though she is still wearing her pyjamas, she did have time to grab a jumper, which she now wears. She knew she was coming then. Perhaps she noticed her reflection stalking her. Perhaps she stepped through willingly. The answers to those questions are, of course, lost to the passages of time. The swans have risen further out of the lake. They are watching as the girl picks her way in bare feet down across the pebbles and stones towards the water. Every beak hangs low. They do not trust her yet. The girl kneels down by the edge of the great black lake. She cups her hands into the water and drags some up to her lips. It does not have time to make contact, however. The swans have made their move. 6 tall, ghost-like figures have moved as one, swept across the still waters of the lake, and alight on the bank, looking at her. We are expecting her to jump back in fear, but she does not. She stands, with a bemused look on her face. She says something to the closest one, but we can't make it out. It's hazy and fuzzy and doesn't quite sound like a language we know. We do, however, recognize the hiss as all the birds are watching her. The girl kicks at a pebble by her feet. It drops into the great black lake without a ripple or a splash. She tries again, another and another stone. The birds are moving closer now. She turns back, kicking stones this time at the swans themselves. The hissing continues. Then she turns back to the closest bird. Hands at her hips, she bends down and says something in a barking, mocking voice that we still do not understand. This swan, bent low in an almost bow, raises its head. That is when the human girl reaches forward and swats at the swan's face. All the hissing stops as a few tufts of feathers scatter to the ground. The human girl barks something once more. We try to stop her. We press forwards, we try to warn her, but the very air itself is a shield, barring our entry. And it is at this moment that we realise the shield is to protect us, not her. If at this moment you had blinked your eyes, you would have missed the entire thing. Every bird moves as one. From crouched low in their dancer-like poise, every bird rises, standing over 6 feet tall. And then, they're all gone. Dived back under the lake. And the human girl has been dragged under the water with them. The great black lake never so much as rippled. Piece 4. The first recorded adventure. Far out across the waves of a torrential sea, a battered old ship creaks in the gale. She is what is known in the other world as an almost wreck. Cannons have blasted her hull apart. Her insides spill out into the icy waters which lap them up. Her mainsail is ragged, still clinging to the mast, but only just, by the smallest glimmer of hope. She is abandoned, deserted by all but one. Hammocks trail miserably below decks, flapping in the downpour. Bloody handprints mark the captain's door, left ajar by the mutineers as they fled. We listen now for any sound from within. It would perhaps be prudent at this point to tell you that those who abandoned ship were once good men, solid hands before the mast and their captain, through even the fiercest storm. But all can turn. And for those poor damned souls, it was a long time in the making. Crack! A pistol shot shrieks through the rain. As the sound rings in our ears, we peer inside the cabin. There is only one candle, and it is out. Hail pounds through the shattered window onto floorboards that groan as the ship sways violently. Hot red blood drips onto the boards too. As lightning begins to flash, illuminating the room, we see a patch of wall is splattered, stained red. The tousled beard and dark emerald eyes we know so well are hidden under the large feathered hat. He is slumped over at the charts, his head lolling forward. The smoking gun lies loose in his left hand. And for a gasp, he is dead. But the ship calls out to him in the upheaval of a vicious wave, and her distress rouses breath back into sodden lungs. He rises, listening intently. Worn, scarred hands run over the walls, sensing the damage she has suffered rather than seeing. Crouching down, he examines the splinters by his feet. The vessel swerves again, and he drops down, pressing his ear full to the floor. A nod of understanding, a scowl at his lips. The man clambers back up onto all fours. A nagging itch twinges at his temple, and he reaches up to scratch it. Blood seeps under crusty fingernails. It is met with a sigh. Sorrow, then, still dogs this man. The same fingertips pull open his grimy shirt. Those eyes, green as merfolk tails, examine 16 old stab wounds settled deep in his chest. And peppered on top of those are around a dozen bullet holes. They were healing, slowly. The blood-soaked crater through his skull would heal too. They always did. The foaming sea roars, and as though jerked out of a trance, the man steps over to the desk and eyes the charts spread across it. It is all coming back to him in spoonfuls, tiny slithers of memory all floating round and around in the back of his mind. As he stares down at one particular map, a spiral of images rush into his thoughts. He remembers their faces, fierce and wild. They didn't seem to see him, didn't register his shouts or pleas. He remembers their skeletal bodies, run ragged to starvation. They had grown tired of his cause. They did not share his desire, his burning soul, his hell. They saw only what the naked eye sees. Empty treasure chests, empty kitchens, and a silent captain. He had forgotten hunger, how it gnaws away at even the toughest men, how it turns manners and order into riots and chaos. So while it ate away at each of his crew, he alone sustained. He alone remained tall and strong. And one day, the crew tore down the barricade he had built many decades ago, blocking off the lowest cargo hold. They had broken in, certain that their elusive captain was hoarding supplies, hiding food for his very own. But when the dust had settled and they could see into the dingy space beyond the barricade, they found no food and no treasure. All that resided in the room was a dusty, old music box. Popping open the lid revealed only a dainty ballerina carved from ebony wood, with minuscule emerald dots marking her eyes. It was then that any remaining ounce of humanity left the crew. Their captain had kept them sailing doggedly on, though the ship was near blown to smithereens. She had fallen into so much more than disrepair, and they along with her. The crew were enraged. Emerald eyes blink, and the man straightens his hat. It is now that he notices a tiny speck in the corner of the map he is currently looking at. The island winks to him, drifting in and out of focus on the parchment, and then it comes to him. A memory rises to the surface and slaps him so hard with recognition that he nearly staggers. He had seen that marking before. He remembers it, lighting up by his hand as he sat hopelessly, feverishly, poring over every chart and map for the 1,000th time. The island had called out to his very soul, and for the first time in so many years, the man heard the first recall of her voice. He had very nearly forgotten, and somehow he knew she must be there. The certainty of that had propelled him to his feet. It had been in that most crucial of moments that the mutiny had begun. The cabin door was flung open, and wild-eyed monsters had come tearing towards him. Of course he tried to persist, to tell them their freedom was at hand, that he had finally found her. But none could hear over the snarling hunger in their bones. In a way, he had to forgive them. It took some time, but eventually the mutineers stepped back, dropping their blades. Their captain was still on his feet, bloodied and beaten, but still breathing. They had howled curses at the skies then. They did not know. They had never known. They called him a witch, a demon. They spat at his feet. Their captain was quite alone, in a pack of wolves. The beasts stared. Then, as one, they raised their guns. When it was done, all were lost overboard. So long ago now. On and on the ship had sailed, rousing once more her captain, who awoke and trod the deck until his chest no longer ached, who manned the wheel until he began to weep, who scoured every map and chart, over and over and over, who despaired once again into his own misery, believing all had to be lost. Not now, though. Now he stands straight and tall once again. The coordinates are now seared into his mind. The captain leaps across the room, flinging on his moth-eaten greatcoat as he breaks into a run. Out of the door and up the steps, soon he is at the helm, and not even the ravenous storm can falter him now. He seizes the old rope coiled by his feet, and once again he lashes himself to the wheel. Thick red scars across his hands and wrists blister and start to reopen. It has been years since last he had such grim determination. And so he rises with the ship as each wave breaks, sending them crashing down into fathomless dark, then back up into the rain. As one they live, as one they will die. Eternally bound together, they have sailed for nearly 100 years, always searching. He will find her. He is more certain than ever before. He will find her. Overhead, a blue star flickers in the heavens, and from somewhere far, far over the waves, we hear a welcoming song.